Hello and welcome to Faith Matters, where we take a spiritual perspective on Merseyside life. Now, we are here today with Jonathan Phillips. John Phillips, who is not only a Church of England pioneer minister, but also curate at St Peter's Church. That's in right. Chester. Mm-hmm. So welcome, John.
Thanks.
Have I got all your titles in?
Just about, yeah. I'm also a director in a theatre company, but I use that a bit more loosely.
Yeah, wonderful. So this is part of today is we're going to be discussing, particularly thinking about theatre-shaped church. Is that right? So first of all, John, what does it mean for those who aren't familiar with the term? What does pioneer minister mean?
It's got lots of meanings, and actually sometimes it can have regional differences. But normally it means people who've given over their lives to planting churches in culturally contextual ways. So there's some of the famous ones, a cafe church, or messy church is one where they've taken the word messy and applied it to kind of mums and dads and kids and families, and then they really do church in the mess, in the painting and in the fun of it. So that's what it normally means. And normally it's for people who have no other connection with church.
Okay, fantastic. So I guess, would you say that being a curate, so like a trainee vicar, that sort of the more traditional or typical type of church ministry that people might expect? Or do you blend the two?
I chose to go for 50-50, so when I got offered my curacy, my amazing incumbent, Reverend Henny Johnston, she was great, and she works in a church in St Mark's in Saltney. She's the incumbent there, and she very bravely took on a pioneer curate, which meant I did half my time doing pioneer mission, and then half my time doing more inherited ministry, like baptisms, weddings, funerals, Sunday services.
Okay, fantastic. And so you moved, is that right? You were part of that church, and then you've now become part of St Peter's?
Yeah, so I was 100% in Saltney at St Mark's, doing kind of theatre-shaped pioneer and other pioneer ministry, but then we were approached and asked if we would then oversee this church here. So it wasn't a team ministry, and they wanted to carve out a new parish, and they wanted to bring in a pioneer ministry really, and they wanted to bring in Henny to make sure that we could really grow this and take it to its next stage of ministry.
Now, just being in here, we are in the actual city centre, aren't we? And there's a cafe here, and it's obviously a bustling sort of church. But you're also doing something a little bit different. Can you explain a little bit maybe about the theatre side of it that you're starting here?
Yeah, so to go way back, I grew up doing drama. I'm very dyslexic, find it very hard to sit still as I'm moving my hands a lot. And I just really struggled with school, and my mum was a drama teacher, so she used drama to help me learn how to sit still, how to at least look like I was listening. And through that I really got into it. I loved acting, I loved all the learning through it. And as I grew up, me and Mum kind of dreamt about how we would set up a theatre school, and Mum did that through a lot of the stuff that we talked about, and she'd been doing it for years anyway. I think she was placating me, and then all through my life I felt this calling to church evangelism, but also to theatre. And every time I got to a certain stage in my life, I'd be like, oh, theatre now. And then there would be this tug, no, church. And then the other way, I'd be like, oh, okay, all church. And then there would be this tug theatre. So at 18, I got my UCAS CD-ROM, as it was back then. And I, in a dyslexic fashion, put in God and drama. And I found about 5 or 6 universities offering theology and drama degrees. And I was like, woohoo! So Chester was one of them. And I came here, and it was really hard. I didn't know there was such a thing as an academic way of studying drama. I thought I was going to come and act, and I didn't. And so, but after that, there was this wonderful opportunity given to me by Chris Duffett, who set up an evangelistic charity nearby, and John Kirkland, who's the vicar at All Saints Church in Hall, and they employed me half-time each. And one of the things that they agreed and set up with me was a community theatre company, where we would seek to use it as a springboard for ministry. It would be secular theatre largely, apart from our street evangelism, which has really developed this idea, because as we started to develop that with adults, we saw how much it was like church. And we would do our workshop, but then afterwards we would then have tea and coffee, and we'd always get on to talking about God. And we had a lovely couple that used to come and say, oh, this is church for us, this is our time, this is our community. And this idea of kind of pioneering a theatre-shaped church kind of grew from that, really, this kind of challenge. And also seeing how Fresh Expressions was growing up in the country and emerging church in North America, that all kind of started to really seep into my DNA and answer some of the questions I had as an evangelist, where we saw people coming to faith but then falling away and partially just because they just couldn't culturally connect with a Sunday morning. So.
And I'm right in thinking as well that part of that sort of the company itself, Be It Theatre Company, is that what it developed into? Is that right?
Yeah. So we initially set it up as the Be It Theatre Company, a slightly pretentious Stanislavskian term about being it, not doing it, and we wanted to be disciples who are being with Jesus, not just doing things for Jesus. So that name really stuck, and that theatre company is still running in Hull, doing really well, run by Perry Nightingale, who's doing a fantastic job running that youth theatre company.
And from what I can see of that theatre company, although I guess in some senses, from the website and things like that, it doesn't necessarily come across as explicitly Christian, but there's an ethos that seems to be underpinning it, in which sort of young people are encouraged to discover their worth, and is that how you set it up with that intention?
Yeah. So I suppose the foundations were that we would speak truth to them through drama. So we would tell them that they were created perfect, but then things got messed up, and we would disciple them through theatre, even though in a sense it wasn't to convert them and it wasn't to hammer them with the gospel, but it was to give them some of that gospel truth. And one of our head-scratching things was going, well, how do we take this to the next level? How do we really work with these people, with their families, so that we weren't lifting young people out of their culture, their context? And that's where we really wrestled with whether we were neutral, whether we were seeking to do something more, something real church-like shape. And actually right now we're developing something quite exciting and quite new in a way, where the Be It Theatre Company is going to carry on, and it's going to, as a youth theatre company, as a springboard, and we're seeking with our adult group to set up something that really is theatre-shaped church. So we meet at 7:15, we do half an hour of fellowship, not that we'd ever call it that, and then we do an hour and a quarter workshop where we're doing the same techniques and having a lot of fun with theatre or putting on a play. So we've just finished James and the Giant Peach. We're now looking to do an adaptation of Twelfth Night. And then afterwards, for those who want to stay, not everyone does every week, we have a time of sharing. Sometimes we'll read some scripture together and put it maybe into a kind of conversation with the play, so kind of comparing the woman at the well with James from James and the Giant Peach, and kind of having a discussion around that, and then we have a time to pray. It's just really relaxed, really lovely. It's a real mix of Christians, non-Christians. It's just a lovely group. And the other thing we're writing at the moment, is kind of half written, is a thing called monthly monologues, where there's this idea that you would book in knowing that it was a worship service, but you'd turn up at the door here at St. Peter's, get given a programme, and you'd sign up to your monologue. So the one that I've been writing recently, it's a bit of a heavy one really, it's called Monologues of Loss. And so one of the monologues, they'd all be researched by the actors. One of the monologues would be the loss of a friend, the other one would be another one would be the loss of a parent, and then two other forms of loss. And you would know that, and you would sign up to your monologue, and you would sit and listen to that monologue. And that there'd be 4 of them, so that'd be about 40 minutes, about 8 minutes per monologue. So you can either experience all 4, or you can do one 4 times, or step out and just reflect. And then we will have a time where there'll be a discussion group that you can sign up to, either of the monologue you were with or just a general one. And then we'll have some testimony time where Christians will share their loss. Then we're going to have an interval where you can get your drink, talk to the people, and then people can leave if they want to. They can sign out. That's the theatre in a way, they can go. And then we'll have some time on teaching how Jesus dealt with loss, then followed on by a time of ministry and worship. So it's a real kind of theatre-shaped church service where we can really engage, but also know that people can sign out when they need to.
Sounds like quite an original concept. I don't feel like I've ever really heard about people doing things like this. But we're going to come to the break shortly. But just before we do, I was wondering if you, is there particular people you're inspired by, or had you seen this model of theatre and church come together like this before? Is there anyone that you've modelled yourself on, or modelled these ideas on?
In a way, but also no. So there was always this challenge of people going, oh, so you want to do Christian drama, or you want to bring drama into church? And it was, you can really see people just wrestling with it, going, oh yeah, it'd be great to have more drama in church, or no, we hate drama in church. And actually it's neither of those things. It's making it drama-shaped, theatre-shaped church. So it's a hard one to say really, because I don't feel like I have seen it. No.
Yeah, no, I think it sounds like quite a unique concept, and I can definitely see it's like using drama really is almost, in some ways, a bit like a therapy, I suppose, partly that sort of thing. Okay, now I think we're just coming towards our break in just a minute. In that case then, John, I'm going to squeeze in one more question, because what we haven't touched on is how you came to go from setting up this theatre company a few years back to then feeling the call to ordination, which are quite different things.
Yeah, no, that was a tough one really, because I think as an evangelist I was getting quite frustrated that there's just no way of being recognised as an evangelist in the Church of England structures. So I wrote off to people like J. John and Michael Green, and I was going, how does this work? I didn't really know what ordination was, and I had no theology of priesthood. And they all wrote back, 3 years of curacy, 3 years of training, that was it, 3 years of education, 3 years of curacy. And I was like, no way, man, I don't want that. So I started to go see my DDO saying, look, I've got this calling and this, and I think the word ordained seems to match that. And so he told me about part-time training, and he told me about pioneer. So I thought, I could keep my theatre company, and I could get ordained and be a pioneer. And actually what it came down to was, eventually it came down to God just giving me the shove, saying it's time to let go.
Well, we are going to come back to more of this in a moment, John, but we're going to stop now for our break. If you'd like to get in touch, do email us with your comments or suggestions at faithmatters@baytvliverpool.com. Hello, welcome back to Faith Matters. I'm here with Jonathan Phillips, who is curate at St Peter's Church and also pioneer minister. Now, welcome back, John. Just before the break, we were talking about how John had come from setting up a theatre company here and then feeling like he was called to ordained ministry. So then now returning to Chester from where you were from, and also to the theatre company that you were part of and founded. I wonder what difference it has been being a priest now, which is obviously quite a different role. Has that affected the way you do ministry, and particularly the theatre aspect of it?
Well, yeah, it has. When I left, it was quite interesting, because we were really wrestling with what church was, what it is. So the guy I handed the theatre company on to, Sam Dern-Hollenby, really ran with it and just carried on creating community. And it was nice, because I stepped away, I really left it behind, and Sam just developed it. And when I came back to it, it was his. I wasn't coming back to it officially. I was just in Saltney, which is about 4 miles away. And I got to see how Sam had delegated and had built team in a world where I had worked alone. And that was really quite a big deal, because I think whilst I was training to be a priest, I was wrestling with what priest meant, and being somebody with quite a low theology really, that we're all priests, and that as a priest I'm an example to others of calling us all into that priesthood, of how to live that life. I really wanted the Church of England to grapple ever more deeply with this fresh expression of church, and I'd been taught a lot about my right now to serve communion, whereas I didn't have that before. And I still wrestle with that. I still wrestle with making sure that it is a holy moment, but not an exclusive moment. And bringing that into a fresh expression, I think, is a really crucial moment to join us with 2,000 years worth of Christians. And that's been quite hard. And baptism as well, and explaining baptism, and explaining that to those who have children and those who get baptised as adults. It's just something that's become a lot more real to me, and meeting regularly and breaking bread together. Yeah, so that's become very real through that.
Just as you were speaking then, I'm thinking of the drama of the Eucharist. Lots of people sometimes talk about how we reenact, as Christians, reenact that moment before Jesus died. Is there a tension then for you to sort of make something too dramatic, or does it belittle it, does it feel...
Yeah. I've always read, in some ways, I mean, aside from the Eucharist, I've always, as somebody who was trained to act and trained to communicate, where integrity really connected with when I got up and whether I was still being myself. And eventually I just had to get over it and just realise that we all perform sometimes. We've all got masks that we put on. Some of them are good, some of them are not so good. I think somebody said it to me once, you've got a phone voice, you've got a person at the door voice, don't worry about it. And actually that really helped, just going, actually, no, I think I'm accountable to my wife, I'm accountable to other people that do go, oh wow, what did you do there? Or why did you suddenly sound like that? And it does help me just to chill out and be a bit more normal. So yeah, I do really.
Thank you. That's interesting. I was thinking about the phrase, some people say you've got to fake it to make it, but perhaps it's not always. I mean, in something, when you talk about the being it, sometimes you have to act something before you become it. In some sense, we talk about Christians. We normally try to encourage people to belong before they necessarily believe all of the doctrine that we stand for.
Yeah.
Maybe that's an example of it. So just thinking a little bit then about things that you've been recently working on. I'm right, I think at Christmas you did a production, was it The Christmas Carol?
Yeah.
Is that right? So can you just tell us maybe just a little bit about how that went and did it fulfil your hopes for it?
Yeah, no, I mean, one of our big things with all our plays, and we communicate this from the youngest age right the way through to the adults, is that we have the potential of changing lives. So I can probably think of 2 or 3 plays, 2 or 3 films that I walked away from and was never the same again. You know, they impacted me so deeply and changed the direction of my life. And so I always present that. We always do that. We always pray beforehand. And A Christmas Carol was just it was just potent. It was full of that opportunity to really speak into people's lives, to challenge them. I don't want to misunderstand Charles Dickens. I feel like he slightly missed that, in the sense of Scrooge's reaction at the end is to do more, is to give more, which is great. It's a real biblical reaction to Jesus. But he doesn't actually come into connection with Jesus. He comes into connection with his own guilt and his own death. And so it was interesting reflecting on that with the group, of trying to communicate grace through a story which actually doesn't fully communicate grace. But I do love it, and it led to some great discussions. We did read some good passages of scripture around it, and people were really challenged. So, yeah.
And with other productions that you've done, have you met individuals who seem to have had any kind of interesting transformations, or particularly grown or tried something new?
Yeah, I mean, historically, with our young people, that was a lovely curve to watch. There was always that sense of watching a kid turn up on the first week, and this is normal in any setting, isn't it? And they're terrified and they're nervous. And what we would always do, we would always interview, and then we would sign them up for a whole term, so that if they were put off in the first week or two, then they had committed to a whole term, a mini performance. And it meant the group was really stable. And so we always just had that privilege. And I think, to be honest, it was a real cold bath starting a group with adults, where suddenly I would do these games and some of them would be really uncomfortable doing it. And I was like, wow, that's a big deal, trying to say to an adult, come on, chill out with all your hang-ups and how embarrassed you are. And I had to really change my language. And one of the privileges of that was that there have been numerous adults who've come back over the years just saying, you know, that really, learning that about myself really changed me. Seeing how faith is part of how you choose the plays, how you pray for us, how we communicate about everything we do, that's taught me that that's how faith should be. And so these are kind of unchurched, de-churched, sometimes just Christians who suddenly see a faith being lived out in an area that they never thought it would be lived out. They'd separated their lives from the sacred and the secular. So that was a real privilege.
And actually, you just started to touch on really the difference between working with adults and young people. And did you find that children are more kind of susceptible to like playing the fool or being more relaxed? Do adults come with their own baggage and inhibitions?
Well, that's quite a funny one, really, because one of my main motivations was to work with bullied kids, and still is, kids who've been left out, kids who couldn't be part of a group, and to create a space where they could be. We do this vocal warm-up called My, I'm Marvellous. It's good with vowels, it's good with the consonants, you know, it's great. And when you get the little kids to do it, they're just like, I'm Marvellous. So they're just there and they love it. You don't have to convince them, you know. And you do it with the slightly older ones and they're like, I'm Marvellous, you know, and after a couple of weeks they're there. And you get to the teenagers and they're like, It's really interesting, and you really have to keep, you know, always talk about the difference between a truth exercise and a silly exercise. And the truth ones, we want them to remember, the silly ones they can forget. And one of the truth ones is they're marvellous and they're made brilliantly, even though we get messed up. And it is fascinating, kind of, when you get a group of adults, it's not so uniformed. You can't just say, well, this group does this or this group does that. And some of the adults, either because they're good at performing or actually they've just got a good self-image, really enjoy that moment and can step into it. And for some, it's just crippling. You're just like, I'm dying inside. You know.
So just then, if we move on to looking to the future, what kind of things are changing, developing? I hear that there are a few things maybe in the pipeline. Do you want to expand on
Yeah,
those?
I mean, with this idea of using theatre to create church, we are looking to how we can really establish worship formats which really honour the historical church, our inherited traditions, but also are very culturally bound. I don't believe there is a church that isn't context shaped. It just was probably shaped to its context a few hundred years ago. So I think that tradition is really in our DNA. I think it's in the Anglican tradition to do liturgical revision. I think it's in every tradition I know at some point has been context, has gone, what's relevant to us now? What's the church fathers doing? Where are our creeds? And the tragedy is really when we just throw it all away. We just say, oh, let's start again. And it's like, why would we start again? When actually we've got all this great stuff. How do we tie it all together? So we do have some exciting ideas cooking, like I shared about the monthly monologues. And there's several other ideas which are really building up steam. And I think one of the exciting things about being here at St. Peter's is this is a mission-shaped church. So over decades, this church has had lots of different people working in it. And now there's a night church here. There's an innovative cafe functioning here. There's a thing called Third Space, which is a wonderful art, therapy, mission outreach to some really broken people and some so-called less broken people. And really we're looking at how we can become a hub just to get people doing it here, but also training people up and sending them out to go and do fresh expressions and mission wherever they are, on their street, in another church building or a social club or whatever. So that's got really exciting. I think there's a lot of heart for that right now.
Thank you, John. Now, just finally then, before we close, is there anything that you would like to say to those who perhaps don't feel like they could be involved in theatre, or perhaps don't see theatre and the church kind of coming together? Is there any final words you'd like to say to encourage people to maybe give it a go?
Well, one of my other major encouragements is the congregation here on Sundays, and how welcoming they've been. They just want to do innovative stuff. They want to open up the doors. And I feel like they've really understood. And I can't remember the passage, but there's a passage where it talks about looking to all things honourable, good and holy. I don't think that passage is saying separate yourself from the world. I think it's saying look at the world and find God in it.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, John. It's been lovely to be with you today in Chester and in St. Peter's Church. And do join us again next time on Faith Matters.